Welcome back, everyone, to Deep Dive. This time, we're going to really get into real-world assets,
RWAs.
which is a simple idea, really, when you get down to it.
Yeah,
You're taking something valuable, out there in the world. Could be houses or bonds.
I've even heard of carbon credits being used.
Yeah, exactly, things like that. And basically, you're turning them into a digital token. Put them on the blockchain.
So, like, bridging the gap, I guess, between those traditional financial markets and
DeFi,
yeah.
decentralized finance. It's all about, recreating the financial stuff we all use. Lending, borrowing, trading, all that. But instead of banks, it all happens on the blockchain.
We've got a ton of sources for this deep dive: CoinGecko, Binance Research, even some IMF reports.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they all point to one thing. This is not some, like, small experiment anymore.
No, not at all.
DeFalama says there's over $6 billion in RWAs already out there.
Yeah, that's right. It's real money. And if you're wondering why it's blowing up like it is right now, well, our sources suggest it's at least partly due to those big macro trends. Interest rates are up, and that makes the yields you can get in the crypto world.
They look less appealing.
Yeah, exactly. Investors are looking for something stable, looking for solid returns.
Yeah, I keep seeing these headlines about BlackRock getting into tokenized US Treasuries. Is that, like, the future?
It could be, yeah. Those traditional investors, they're naturally drawn to U.S. government bonds, safe, reliable, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
But what's cool here is this lets them access those bonds right on the blockchain.
So instead of going through a broker or a bank, you could, like, own a tiny piece of a US Treasury through a token.
Exactly, and we're seeing that happen. CoinGecko reports tokenized U.S. Treasuries have seen crazy growth in 2024.
Like, how much are we talking?
Well, they went from $769 million to over $2.2 billion in just 9 months.
Wow, that's massive.
It really shows you where the interest is going.
And it's not just, like, random people, right? It's big names jumping in. BlackRock's BUIDL fund, Franklin Templeton doing their thing with FOBXX.
Right, and then you've got platforms like Hashnote and Open Eden popping up too.
It seems like everyone wants in on this.
Well, it's not just about treasuries, though. Let's get into private credit.
Okay, yeah, private credit. I'm honestly not super familiar with that whole world.
So basically, it's about companies taking out loans, but instead of using crypto as collateral,
Which can be pretty volatile.
very volatile, yeah, they're using these tokenized real-world assets as collateral instead.
So it could be anything like real estate, invoices, anything with real value.
Yeah, exactly. It makes things more stable for lenders, and it gives borrowers who might not have a huge crypto portfolio access to capital. The IMF estimates the private credit market is worth over $2 trillion. So DeFi is just getting started here.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is. Imagine a small business in Argentina, they need a loan, but their currency's all over the place, right? With RWAs, they could get a loan backed by crypto, and that protects them from those big swings in their local currency. It's a big deal for businesses in places that have had trouble with traditional finance.
I never thought of it like that. It's really about making finance more fair, isn't it?
It has that potential, yeah. And some protocols are really leading the way here. Centrifuge, Maple, and Goldfinch, to name a few.
So we've talked about tokenized treasuries, private credit on the blockchain. It sounds like there's way more to the world of RWAs than just those two, though, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, it seems like everything's getting tokenized these days. I mean, CoinGecko talks about tokenized gold, but are we talking about, like, owning a piece of a skyscraper?
Yeah, we are. Platforms like Realty and Parkle are making that happen. What's really cool is how creative people are getting with this stuff.
I've read about some pretty wild ideas.
Like Skytrade, for example. They're tokenizing air rights.
Air rights? What, like the air we breathe?
Not quite. It's the space above a property. So imagine you own a building in a city. You can only build so high. But what about the space above that? Those air rights, that can be worth a fortune, especially in crowded cities.
So I could sell the right for someone to build, I don't know, a giant tower on top of my building, and Skytrade would help me, like, tokenize that right and treat it.
Exactly. It's a pretty wild concept, but it could change how we think about developing cities. Cities could use those tokenized air rights to encourage developers to build, I don't know, more green spaces or affordable housing, things like that.
Wow, so they could use it to, like, make sure development is done responsibly.
Yeah, kind of like that. It's pretty neat.
That is really cool. Any other examples that have stood out to you?
Well, we're also seeing RWAs being used to fight climate change. Toucan, for example, they're tokenizing carbon credits.
Now that's something I can get behind. So how does that actually work?
It's kind of like bringing the carbon market, the one where companies buy and sell carbon offsets, onto the blockchain. Companies are always looking for ways to offset their emissions, right? And they could do that by buying these carbon credits, which represent reductions in greenhouse gases. But usually, these credits are traded as paper certificates. It's slow and clunky.
Ah, so with Toucan, those carbon credits become tokens that can be traded on the blockchain instead.
Yeah, it makes it way easier and more efficient for companies to get involved in carbon offsetting, which could have a huge impact on global emissions.
It's amazing how this tech can be used for good. Are there any other like outside the box uses you've seen?
Well, there's Plume Network. They're trying to tokenize everything: luxury watches, fine art, intellectual property, all kinds of stuff.
So like I could own a tiny piece of a Picasso.
Maybe, yeah. Or you could own a share of the copyright to a hip song. It really opens up what we can invest in.
It's pretty mind-blowing, honestly. Feels like we're on the verge of like a whole new way of thinking about ownership and value.
I think you're right. And this is just the beginning. We haven't even talked about like tokenized voting rights, fractional ownership of sports teams, or decentralized identity solutions built on RWAs. The possibilities are huge.
Okay, before we get too carried away, let's come back down to earth for a minute. We've talked about what RWAs are, tokenized treasuries, private credit, all that good stuff. But why is this all happening now? Is it just about chasing those higher yields?
Well, that's part of it, for sure. But there's a bigger shift going on here, I think. See, traditional finance, it's always been about exclusivity, about high barriers to entry. Only certain people could get access to certain investments. RWAs are starting to change that.
Okay, I can see how that would be appealing.
And it's not just about individual investors either. RWAs could completely change entire industries.
Right,
Take supply chain finance, for example. Right now, it's super complicated, relies on all this slow paperwork.
right.
But with RWAs, you can tokenize invoices, speed up payments, make the whole supply chain more transparent and efficient.
That makes a lot of sense. It all sounds really promising, but there's got to be some downsides too, right? Any challenges or risks we should be thinking about?
Oh, of course. We touched on a few already, like worries about centralization, potential problems with oracles, the need for clear regulations. We've got to tackle those as this space grows up.
Makes sense.
And for RWAs to really change finance, we need more people to get on board, both regular investors and big institutions.
So it's about building trust and making sure people understand how all this stuff works.
Yeah, exactly. And we need regulations that encourage innovation but also protect investors. It's a tough balance.
Sounds like it. But it seems like things are moving in the right direction. We're seeing more and more of those traditional finance players starting to explore RWAs.
Definitely. And I think as the technology gets better and regulations become clearer, things are going to really take off.
Okay, I want to circle back to those really cool examples we were talking about. Tokenized air rights with Skytrade? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
All right, let's break it down. In a city, there's only so much space to build up, right? But what about the space above a building? That's where air rights come in.
Okay, yeah.
So if you own a building, you could sell the right for someone to build, say, a skyscraper on top of your building.
Right.
And Skytrade is creating a market where those rights can be tokenized and traded. Makes it much easier for developers to buy and sell those rights.
So it's like unlocking a whole new dimension of real estate.
Exactly. And it could have a big impact on how cities are planned. Cities could use those tokenized air rights to, encourage developers to build more green spaces or affordable housing.
It's like a way to steer development in the right direction.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I love that. And then there's Toucan trying to tackle climate change with their tokenized carbon credits.
All right, Toucan's building this bridge between the voluntary carbon market and the blockchain. They take those carbon credits, the ones that represent real reductions in greenhouse gases, and they turn them into digital tokens.
So instead of companies buying and selling paper certificates, they can trade those carbon credits on the blockchain.
Exactly. It makes the whole process way smoother and makes it a lot easier for businesses to offset their emissions.
I love that they're using this technology to do some good in the world. And what about Plume Network? They seem to be taking a broader approach, right? Tokenizing lots of different things.
Yeah, Plume Network wants to tokenize all kinds of assets: luxury goods, fine art, intellectual property, you name it.
So, like, I could own a fraction of a Picasso painting, or maybe a share of the copyright to a song.
Hypothetically, yes. It creates all sorts of new opportunities for investors.
It's incredible to think about. It really feels like we're seeing the start of a whole new financial system.
I agree. And the exciting thing is, this new system could be more inclusive, more efficient, and more transparent than the old ways of doing things.
It's a lot to take in, but it sounds very promising.
It is. But with all this innovation, we need to make sure this new system is built the right way. It needs to be secure, ethical, and well regulated.
It's a huge responsibility.
It is. The technology is amazing, but it's how we use it that really matters in the end.
Okay, we've explored the potential of RWAs, the challenges, and some really amazing examples. But before we wrap up, I want to dig a little deeper. What does all this mean for the average person? How will RWAs actually impact our lives?
That's the question that really gets me thinking. Like the potential for RWAs to change our daily lives, it's huge.
I know, right? It's hard to even imagine.
Yeah. We're talking about changing how we think about owning things, about getting access to financial stuff that, maybe wasn't possible before.
So, paint me a picture. What kind of future could this lead to?
Okay, so imagine a world where you don't need like a ton of money to buy a whole apartment building. Instead, you could invest in like a bunch of tokenized rental properties all over the world. You're earning passive income from real estate, but without all the hassle of being a landlord.
I have to admit, that sounds pretty tempting, even for someone like me who can't even keep a houseplant alive.
Right. Uh-huh. But it goes beyond real estate too. Think about like a small business owner. They're in a country where it's really tough to get a loan from a bank.
Yeah, I can see that.
But with RWAs, they get access a global pool of lenders, people who are willing to invest in their tokenized business assets. It's like crowdfunding, but like on steroids.
So it's not just about making investing easier, it's about giving power to people who've been left out of the traditional financial system.
That's exactly it. And it's not just about finance either. Think about healthcare. We could have tokenized medical records, making it easier and safer to share data between patients and doctors,
Oh, yeah, that would make things so much smoother.
streamline everything, improve the quality of care.
Exactly. What about education? Any potential there?
Oh, tons. Imagine like degrees or certificates that are tokenized. It'd be easy to verify, which could make the whole education system more transparent and fair, especially for people who, might not have access to those traditional schools and universities.
It really feels like we're talking about changing society as a whole.
It does, doesn't it?
But is this all just like a far off dream? Or is it starting to happen now?
It's happening right now. We're laying the groundwork, planting the seeds, all that. It's early days, but the potential is just massive.
So, for everyone listening who's like, okay, I'm intrigued, what do I do? What advice would you give them? How can they prepare for this new world?
The most important thing, educate yourself. Learn how blockchain technology works, get those core RWA concepts down, and then start checking out the different platforms and protocols out there.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to, experiment a little. Maybe put a little money into a tokenized asset just to see how it all works. Get a little taste of the future.
Dip your toes in the water.
Exactly. And maybe the most important thing, stay engaged. This is a fast moving space. There's always something new to learn. Keep asking questions, challenge those assumptions, and be part of the conversation.
Because this isn't just about watching the future happen, it's about helping to create it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been such an awesome deep dive into the world of real world assets. I've learned so much, and honestly, I'm pretty excited about what the future holds.
I've had a blast exploring this with you. It's a good reminder that technology can be a powerful force for good and that staying curious is so important.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you've learned something new, expanded your horizons, and maybe even gotten a little bit pumped about the future of finance.
Remember, as we've talked about today, the future isn't something that just happens to us. We have the power to make it. So go out there, explore, learn, and be part of the RWA revolution.
And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.